My world is a prison built from sound and scent. I know the cold, rough grain of the stone floor beneath my knees better than I know my own reflection, a face I haven't seen since I was 9 years old. The air in my uncle's kitchen is always thick with the smell of burnt herbs and resentment. I am Elara and I am blind, not by accident but by a legacy. A curse, they whisper, passed from my grandmother to my mother, and finally to me. A punishment for some forgotten sin, they say, the price of existing. Tonight, the sounds from outside are a special kind of torture. Music, laughter, the distant, joyful howls of the harvest festival celebrating the full moon. It paints pictures in my mind I can never truly see. Dancing. Smiling faces. Young wolves finding their destined mates under the silver light. For a blind omega like me, such things are fairy tales. Cruel, beautiful fairy tales. My hands are raw and scarred, moving with a precision born of painful lessons through a pot of cold, greasy water. Every chipped dish I've ever dropped, every burn I've earned learning the stove's secrets, is written there in calluses and thin white lines. Clumsy, useless girl, my Aunt Livia's voice slices through the distant music. It's a sound sharper than any knife. I flinch, my heart squeezing tight in my chest. I don't answer. I learned long ago that words are just weapons I hand them to use against me. The bread, you idiot, can't you smell it burning? I scramble toward the oven's blistering heat, the acrid scent of charred grain already stinging my nose. My hands shake as I pull the blackened loaves from the stone mouth with the wooden paddle. This mistake will cost me. Dinner, maybe breakfast too. My stomach tightens, but the hunger is a familiar, hollow friend. My Uncle Borin fills the doorway. I can feel his presence, a heavy, oppressive shadow. His footsteps on the stone are deliberate, menacing. Wasted. All of it, he growls, his voice thick with the ale he surely drank at the festival. Do you have any idea what that grain cost? Any idea how much you take from us? I bow my head, my long, unbound hair falling like a pale curtain. Forgive me, uncle, I will make more, I will work through the night. His laugh is a harsh, ugly sound. Work? You call this work? You're a burden, Elara. A cursed burden we've carried for 12 long years out of the goodness of our hearts. Your parents had the decency to die quickly in that rogue attack, left you behind like a broken thing for us to deal with. The words land like physical blows, but I am numb to them, or so I tell myself. I focus on the sharp pain in my knees from the stone, using it to anchor the storm inside me. Tears are a luxury that only invites more cruelty. Through the window, the festival's joy feels like mockery. Lord Kael, the territorial alpha, is hosting. I know his name, his title. Such things matter in the world of wolves. They dictate lives. They dictate mine. My aunt's voice takes on a new tone, one that freezes the blood in my veins. It's the sound of calculation, of a merchant finding a way to offload spoiled goods. Borin, I heard something at the market today. Sir Alistair is looking for household help, for his special projects. Someone discreet, someone who won't be missed. Sir Alistair. The name alone is a chill down my spine. Whispers about him travel on the wind, carried by fearful merchants and tight-lipped servants. Omegas who enter his service don't come back. They vanish. Their fates are stories told in hushed tones after dark. The girl eats more than she's worth, Uncle Borin muses, and the thoughtful cruelty in his voice is worse than his anger. Winter is coming, our own children to feed. Perhaps it's time we considered other arrangements. Panic, cold and sharp, lances through my numbness. Please, the word escapes me, a desperate, cracked whisper. I can eat less, scraps, I can work harder, I swear it. Please don't send me to him, please. The slap is instantaneous. It explodes across my cheek, throwing me sideways. My head rings. The metallic taste of blood fills my mouth where my teeth have cut my lip. Stars burst behind my sightless eyes. You dare tell us what to do? Borin snarls, standing over me. 12 years. 12 years of charity, of sheltering a cursed, blind creature, and this is your gratitude? Complaints, demands? I press my palm to my burning face, fighting the hot press of tears. 12 years of servitude. 12 years of making myself small and silent. 12 years of calling their contempt shelter and their cruelty care. And it was never, ever enough. The festival music swells, a symphony of everything I will never have. Connection, belonging, the fierce, protective love of a mate, a love that binds two souls for life. Out there under the moon, wolves are finding their other halves. And in here, on the cold stone floor, I am nothing. A shadow, a ghost in my own life. I curl into myself, the charred bread forgotten beside me. The decision has been made. I see it in the grim silence that follows my uncle's rage. Sir Alistair will come before dawn. I know this with a certainty that settles in my bones like ice. As the moon climbs higher, casting its meaningless silver light, a resolve hardens within me, brittle and desperate. I will not go to Sir Alistair. I cannot. Whatever lies in the dark forest beyond our village, whatever wild death awaits a blind Omega alone in the wilderness, it has to be better than the fate they have chosen for me. The music finally fades. The drunken snores from the main room begin. This is my only chance. My heart hammers against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and determination. I have nothing. Just a worn cloak that was my mother's, a small eating knife, and a little wooden raven my father carved for me a lifetime ago. A raven, not a wolf. He said they saw truths wolves often missed. I wrapped these pitiful treasures in a scrap of cloth. The kitchen door creaks as I ease it open. The night air is cool on my fevered skin, smelling of damp earth and dying leaves. The harvest moon hangs heavy, a presence I feel more than see. I step into the darkness I have known all my life. But this time, I am walking into a different kind of dark. My bare feet find the narrow path away from the village. The stones are sharp. The world beyond is a tapestry of sound, rustling leaves, distant night creatures, the sigh of the wind. I don't look back. There is nothing for me there, only chains, only the slow death of a spirit. The forest ahead is ancient and terrifying, but for the first time in 12 years, I am choosing my own path. Even if it leads to my end, it will be my end. The path grows fainter. The village sounds fade away, swallowed by the deep, breathing silence of the woods. An hour passes. Maybe two, I am truly alone. And then the path vanishes entirely. My feet search, finding only uneven ground and tangled roots. Panic rises, bitter in my throat. I am lost, completely, utterly lost. I force myself to breathe, to listen. Water, a trickle to my left, a stream, it could lead somewhere, or lead me deeper into oblivion. I turn toward the sound, pushing through brambles that tear at my thin dress. The ground slopes down. My foot catches, and I am falling, tumbling down an embankment in a whirl of pain and terror. I land hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. A white-hot agony shoots through my left shoulder, not broken, but wrenched. Useless. I lie there, stunned, lost, injured, alone. The reality crashes down and a sob breaks from my lips. This was a mistake, a prideful, stupid mistake. I am going to die here. The stream gurgles nearby. At least I won't die of thirst. I crawl toward it, my injured arm cradled to my chest. The water is icy, shocking against my cut lips. I am lowering my head to drink when I hear it. A sound, not the forest, not the water. A low, deep rumble that vibrates through the very earth beneath me. It is primal, ancient. It is the sound of power, and it is very, very close. Every hair on my body stands on end. My wolf instincts, long suppressed, scream a single word predator. I freeze. Water drips from my trembling fingers. The night goes perfectly, horribly silent. No insects, no rustling leaves. As if the forest itself is holding its breath. Then I smell it musk, pine, cold stone, and something else, something wild and intelligent and overwhelmingly male. He is here. The scent enveloped me, not with menace, but with a staggering, overwhelming presence. It was like standing at the foot of a mountain, feeling its immensity in the dark. My heart hammered so violently I was sure the creature could hear it, a frantic drumbeat giving away my position. I pressed myself into the muddy bank, making myself small, though I knew it was hopeless. I was a wounded rabbit hoping the hawk would look away. He moved closer, not with the stealth of a hunter, but with the deliberate, unconcerned pace of something that had nothing to fear. Twigs snapped under a weight that was far too heavy for a normal wolf. Leaves crunched. He was circling me, slowly, methodically. I bit down on the knuckle of my good hand, the pain a desperate anchor against the whimper trying to escape my throat. This was it. The forest's answer to my foolish hope. A quick, wild death instead of a slow, cruel one. The footsteps stopped. He was directly in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could hear the slow, steady draw of his breath. It wasn't the panting of an animal. It was controlled, intelligent. This was no ordinary beast. This was a shifter, and from the sheer power rolling off him, an alpha. Please? The word was a torn whisper, ripped from me by sheer terror. I'm not trespassing, I'm just lost. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, more terrifying than any growl. He was listening. He understood. For endless heartbeats, nothing moved. The world was reduced to the cold mud beneath me, the throbbing in my shoulder, and the terrifying, magnificent presence before me. Then a soft sound. Not a growl, a low, rumbling exhale that held a note of consideration. The great weight settled onto the ground nearby, not in a pounce, but in a watchful crouch. He was waiting. For what, I didn't know. Minutes trickled by, measured by my shaky breaths. The terror began to ebb, replaced by a bewildered, fragile curiosity. He hadn't killed me. Why? Was he toying with his food, or was it something else? I won't hurt you, I whispered again, feeling utterly absurd. Not that I could. Another sound, softer this time. A gentle huff, almost like a sigh. It wasn't threatening. It felt patient. The dam inside me, the one holding back 12 years of loneliness and fear, cracked. I don't have anywhere to go, I confessed, the words spilling out in a broken stream. They were going to sell me. To a terrible man, so I ran, but I don't know how to survive out here. I can't see, I'm hurt, and I'm so scared. I admitted it all to the darkness, to the predator whose eyes I couldn't meet. I waited for the end. Instead, I felt warmth. A gentle, surprising pressure against the back of my uninjured hand. Something soft, thick, dense fur. My breath caught. He was close enough to touch. Slowly, hardly daring to believe it, I uncurled my fingers. They brushed against the coarse, damp fur of what could only be a massive head. Beneath the fur was solid bone, a skull larger than any natural wolf's. A shiver that wasn't from fear went through me. He was letting me touch him. He remained perfectly, impossibly still under my trembling exploration. When my fingers traced the curve of a tall, pointed ear, he leaned into the contact, just slightly, a silent acceptance. You're, I whispered, all momentarily drowning the fear. You're magnificent. A deep, resonant rumble answered me, vibrating up through my fingertips. It was a sound of pure pleasure. He shifted then, and I felt the soft, wet leather of his nose brush against my torn sleeve, then gently against my injured shoulder. He was sniffing, assessing the damage. The touch was clinical, careful. A healer's touch, not a killer's. Then he stood and moved away. The sudden absence of his warmth felt like a loss. Panic, sharp and fresh, lanced through me. He was leaving. I was being abandoned in the dark once more. Wait, I called out, my voice small and pathetic against the vast forest. But there was no sound of retreat. Instead, I heard rustling in the undergrowth a short distance away. Snapping of small branches. He was doing something. My heart pounded in a new rhythm, not just fear, but a desperate, fragile hope. He returned. I felt him place something on the ground beside me. Then he nudged my good hand toward it. My fingers encountered cool, smooth leaves wrapped around something. I unfolded them, berries. A handful of wild, late season blackberries. Food. A sob of gratitude choked me. Thank you, I whispered into the night. Thank you. He settled down again, closer this time, a wall of heat and protection between me and the unknown dark. I ate the berries slowly, each one a burst of sweet tart flavor, a promise. He had not brought me death, he had brought me supper. Exhaustion, delayed by terror, crashed over me like a wave. My shoulder throbbed, but the sharp edge of panic was gone. I was still lost. I was still injured, but I was not alone. I curled on my side, facing where I felt his warmth. I don't know who you are, I murmured, my eyelids heavy, or why you're helping a stranger, but thank you for not leaving me in the dark. A soft, low sound answered me, like a distant roll of thunder, a lullaby in a language of growls and breath. My protector was watching over me. As sleep pulled me under, my last thought was not of fear, but of wonder. The forest I had feared as a tomb had sent me a guardian. A silent, wild guardian who asked for nothing but my trust. And for the first time in my life, I gave it freely, sinking into the blackness with the sense of a great, warm shadow standing vigil between me and the world. I woke to birdsong and the gentle, persistent nudge of a cold, wet nose against my cheek. Dawn had crept in, a pale gray warmth on my skin. For a disoriented moment, I forgot where I was. Then the smell of damp earth, pine, and wolf filled my senses, and memory returned. My guardian was there, his head close to mine. He huffed softly, a clear, "Are you awake?" My shoulder was stiff and sore, but the white-hot agony had subsided to a deep, manageable ache. "I'm awake," I said, my voice raspy. He moved away, and I heard the familiar sound of something being placed on the ground. More food. This time, my exploring fingers found strips of dried meat, surprisingly tender, and more berries. He'd been hunting. For me. As I ate, he paced a slow circle around our little camp by the stream, his movements relaxed but alert. He was on patrol. The realization sent another wave of that awe through me. This wasn't just a chance act of kindness. This was protection. "You're staying with me?" I said, not quite a question. A soft woof from my left was his answer. "Yes." "Why?" I asked the air. "I have nothing to offer you. I'm a burden." He was suddenly in front of me, his large head butting gently against my chest, nearly knocking the breath from me. It wasn't an aggressive move. It was a reprimand, a firm, physical denial of my words. "Stop that," it said. I couldn't help it. A laugh bubbled up, strained and watery, but real. All right, message received." He made a satisfied sound and settled on his haunches, facing me. I could feel his gaze, heavy and intelligent. I wished with a sudden, fierce longing that I could see him. What color was his fur? His eyes? Was he gray like storm clouds or dark like the forest soil? Can you show me?" I asked hesitantly, extending my good hand. He understood. He dipped his great head and pushed it under my waiting palm. I gasped softly. His fur was thicker than I'd imagined, a dense, plush undercoat beneath coarser guard hairs. I traced the strong lines of his muzzle, the powerful set of his jaw, the tall, alert ears that twitched under my touch. My fingers journeyed over the broad plane of his forehead, down the strong column of his neck. He was enormous. solid muscle and ancient power contained in a graceful, lethal form. You're an alpha, I breathed, certainty settling in my soul. A true alpha, not just some border patrol wolf. He didn't confirm or deny. He just leaned into my touch, a quiet rumble purring in his chest. The mightiest creature I had ever encountered was purring under my clumsy, scarred fingers. The absurdity of it, the sheer impossibility, made my eyes sting. I'm Elara, I whispered. He nuzzled my palm, a greeting. When I finished eating, he rose and nudged my uninjured side with his head, urging me to stand. Then he positioned himself beside me, a living, breathing pillar for me to lean on. He wanted me to follow him. Where are we going? I asked, my good hand sinking into the fur at his shoulder. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, supporting my weight. He was leading me, and I, with nothing but a blind faith born of desperation and his unexpected kindness, followed. The journey was slow. He moved with infinite patience, guiding me around unseen routes and gullies, stopping when I needed to catch my breath, his body a steady buffer against low-hanging branches. He was not just leading a blind girl, he was creating a path for her. The care he took was humbling. After what felt like an hour of careful travel, the sounds changed. The dense forest chatter opened up. The ground became more level. And then I heard it, the soft, sad groan of wood under tension. A door. He nudged me forward. My hands found rough-hewn timber, an old door frame. A cabin, shelter? I whispered, disbelief washing over me. He pushed past me, and I heard the door swing open on protesting hinges. He waited for me to enter. Inside, the air was still and dusty, but dry. It smelled of old smoke, cedar, and the faint, lingering scent of human habitation. A hunter's cabin, long abandoned but still sound. I moved inside, my hands flying over the space. A stone fireplace, a rough wooden table, a cot piled with what felt like old, dry furs. A cache of firewood, it was a palace. You knew this was here, I said, turning toward his warmth. You brought me to a safe place. He made that soft, affirmative sound and moved to the hearth. I heard the scrape of flint, the crackle of dry tinder catching, and then the warm, blossoming roar of a fire being born. Light, a concept, a warmth on my face filled the cabin. He had not just led me to shelter, he had made it a home. The rest of the day passed in a quiet, surreal peace. He brought me water from a spring he knew. He laid a rabbit, already cleaned, by the fire to cook. He watched as I explored the small space, memorizing it by touch. When I stumbled, he was there, a solid presence to steady me. When I winced while trying to move my injured arm, he nosed a bundle of dried leaves toward me. Willow bark, I realized after smelling it. Pain relief. As evening drew in and the fire painted the room in dancing heat, I sat on the cot, emotionally exhausted. Who are you? I asked the shadow by the fire. You're no ordinary rogue wolf. You're educated, you're strategic, you're kind. What pack do you belong to? Why are you out here alone? He was silent for a long time. Then I heard the subtle shift of fur, the quiet sigh. He crossed the room and lay down on the floor beside the cot, his great head resting near my feet. The message was clear. The questions didn't matter. He was here, I was safe. But my mind wouldn't rest. An alpha of his obvious power didn't just wander the deep woods playing guardian angel to lost omegas. He had a story. One he was choosing, for now, not to tell. The fire crackled. The wind whispered outside. And in that small, dusty cabin, a bond was forming. Not the explosive, destined fire of a mate bond, at least I didn't think so. This was something quieter, deeper, a bond of sanctuary, of chosen protection. He had seen me at my most broken and vulnerable, and instead of exploiting that weakness, he had built a fortress around it. I don't know your name, I said softly, lying down and pulling the furs over me. so I'll call you Silas. It means man of the forest. It fits. A low, vibrating rumble came from the floor. Approval. Good night, Silas, I whispered, and from the darkness a sound answered. A true, soft howl, barely more than a breath of song. It wasn't a call to the moon, it was a song for the cabin. A song for the fire. A lullaby for the broken girl he'd decided to protect. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in years, guarded by a silent king in wolf's clothing. 3 days in the cabin. 3 days of quiet routine, of healing, of a peace so profound it felt fragile, like a soap bubble. Sila's was a constant, silent presence. He hunted. He kept the fire. He guided me to the spring. His intelligence was a tangible thing in the room, a watchful, patient intelligence that spoke of a mind far beyond the animal. On the fourth morning, something changed. I woke to the sound of the fire already crackling, but the movements around the cabin were different. Lighter, more precise. The soft scuff of leather on wood, not paws, the gentle clink of a metal pot. My breath froze in my lungs. He was in human form. I lay perfectly still, listening. He moved with a quiet efficiency, confident in the space. He thought I was still asleep. A strange, nervous thrill went through me. Who was the man behind the wolf? I must have made some small sound, a change in my breathing because the movement stopped. I know you're awake, Elara. The voice was deep, calm. It resonated through the small cabin, warm and rich like honeyed mead, yet underpinned with a strength that reminded me of stone. It was the voice of the alpha, unmasked. I slowly sat up, pulling the furs to my chin. You can speak. A soft, low chuckle. I can. Among other things, I apologize for the deception. It seemed easier to offer help as a wolf to a terrified girl in the dark. It was, I admitted quietly. I would have been more afraid of a man. I thought so. He was moving again, closer. I could smell him now, the same musk and pine, but layered with clean, male scent, sun-warmed skin and leather. He knelt by the fire and I heard him pouring something. My name is Kaelen. Kaelen, it suited the voice, strong, regal, a name that held its own weight. You're not from the local packs, I said, my mind working. Your accent, it's northern, refined. A pause. Observant, yes, I am from the northern reaches originally. What brought you so far south and into wolf form for so long? I pressed gently, sensing the careful boundaries around his story. This time the pause was longer. I was attacked, he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. A group of rogues, well organized, I was separated from my companions. Wolf form heals faster, and it's less conspicuous for a lone traveler trying to avoid further attention. He was leaving oceans of truth unsaid. The attack wasn't random. The attention he was avoiding wasn't just from rogues, but I understood secrets. I had my own. You could have left me by that stream, I said. You were injured alone. Taking on a blind Omega was a risk. Don't. The word was sharp, then instantly softened. Don't speak of yourself as a burden, Elara. You are not. Finding you, it gave me a purpose. Helped me focus on something other than my own predicament. He moved closer, and I felt the warmth of his body as he sat on the floor beside the cot. How is your shoulder? Better, thanks to you and the willow bark. Good. He placed something in my hands, a warm wooden bowl. A rich, savory smell rose from it. Stew. It's simple, rabbit and forest roots. I took a bite. It was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. Not because of the recipe, but because it was given freely with care. It's wonderful. Thank you, Kaelen. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then I asked, describe the forest to me. Here around the cabin. What does it look like in the morning light? He was quiet for a moment, as if assembling the picture. The cabin sits in a small clearing, he began, his voice taking on a lyrical quality. The trees here are ancient oaks, their trunks wider than you and I standing together. Their leaves are turning, a fire of copper and gold against the evergreen pines. The sunlight comes down in slanting pillars through the branches, so thick with dust motes they look like shafts of solid gold. There's moss everywhere, deep emerald green, so soft it looks like velvet laid over every stone and fallen log. And just beyond that birch tree, the stream you found catches the light, turning it into a ribbon of molten silver twisting through the woods. His words painted a masterpiece in my mind. I could see it, truly see it, tears pricked behind my blind eyes. It sounds magical. It is, he said softly, but not as magical as the fact that you're here to hear it described. My cheeks warmed. You have a way with words. You've been educated, trained, not as a hunter or a soldier, as a leader. Another telling silence. I have had responsibilities, he said carefully. I have been groomed for a certain life, one that feels very far away from this cabin. Is that why you were traveling? To return to that life? Yes, he said, and the word was heavy. There are duties I cannot ignore forever, people who depend on me. He sighed, a sound of deep weariness. I will need to leave soon, Elara. The words were a cold splash of reality. The bubble trembled. I understand, I whispered, though my heart clenched painfully. You've already done so much more than, you're coming with me. I blinked. What? I am not leaving you here, he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. You have no pack, no protection. The forest is not a permanent home for you. You will come with me too to my home as my guest. Kaelen, I can't. Wherever you're from, a blind, cursed omega appearing on your doorstep, it would cause problems for you. I heard the tension in your voice when you spoke of your duties. My problems are my own to manage, he said, his tone shifting into something harder, more authoritative. It was the alpha command, not directed at me, but at the universe itself. I will not abandon you. You are under my protection now. That is not a temporary condition. Why? I asked, the question bursting from me. Why does it matter so much? You don't know me. He moved so quickly I gasped. His hands, large and warm, gently framed my face, his thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized were falling. Because from the moment I found you, something in my soul recognized something in yours, he said, his voice low and intense, vibrating with a truth he could no longer contain. It is not just pity, Alara. It is not just charity. It is a knowing. A certainty that defies all reason and protocol. Do you understand what I am saying? My breath hitched, the mate bond, the legendary, fate driven connection between two wolves. It was the dream of every Omega, the foundation of our stories. It couldn't be, not for me. Not with a man like him. Kaelen, I breathed, shaking my head. It's impossible. It is the only thing that feels possible, he countered, his forehead leaning against mine. The gesture was so intimate, so filled with a desperate affection, it stole my breath. I have spent years meeting those deemed suitable by politics and bloodline. Not one sparked a flicker of what I felt when I heard your voice, trembling with fear but still holding on to courage. You are my mate, Elara. I am as certain of it as I am of my own name. The world tilted. The curse, the blindness, my worthlessness, they all crashed against this impossible, glorious declaration. But I'm nobody, I'm broken. You are the one who makes me feel whole, he whispered. You are the sanctuary I didn't know I was seeking. And then he kissed me. It was not a demand, but a question. A soft, tender press of his lips against mine, searing in its gentleness. It was my first kiss. And in that touch, something electric and profound ignited in my core. The world didn't light up with vision, but with sense. I felt his strength, his loneliness, his unwavering, awestruck love for me. It was a connection deeper than sight, truer than any spoken vow. When he pulled back, we were both breathing heavily. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes," I choked out. "I feel it." The sound he made was pure relief. He gathered me into his arms, careful of my shoulder, holding me as if I were the most precious, fragile treasure. I buried my face in his chest, breathing in his scent, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart against my cheek. The bubble wasn't broken. It had just expanded to include a terrifying, wonderful truth. My silent guardian wolf was a man named Kaelen, and he believed, with every fiber of his being, that we were destined. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying a new sound on its edge, not the forest. The distant, unmistakable baying of hounds, and voices, many voices. Kaelen went rigid, his arms tightening around me. "They're early," he muttered, a grim tension returning to his voice. "Who?" I asked, fear returning. "The search party," he said, rising to his feet, his posture shifting from lover to warrior. "My disappearance has caused concern. They've found me." A heavy fist pounded on the cabin door, making me jump. "Your Majesty," a voice boomed from outside. "By the moon, are you in there?" "Your Majesty." The words echoed in the small cabin, in the vast, sudden silence of my understanding. Kaelen wasn't just an alpha from the north. He was the Alpha King. And I, Elara, the blind, cursed Omega, was his claimed mate. The title hung in the air like a physical blow. "Your Majesty, King, not just any alpha, the Alpha King." Kaelen, my silent guardian, the patient wolf, the man who had just kissed me with such heartbreaking tenderness, was the sovereign of all the wolf territories. The weight of that truth crushed the breath from my lungs. I felt him tense beside me, his hand finding mine and squeezing it, a silent plea. "Trust me." But how could I? The gulf between us, which had felt bridgeable moments before, now stretched into a chasm of impossible proportions. The pounding came again. "Your Majesty, we must insist. We have reason to believe you're in danger." Kaelin's voice, when he finally spoke, was no longer the warm, intimate tone from moments ago. It was the voice of command, cool and authoritative, ringing with a power that made the small cabin walls seem to shrink. "Stand down, Captain. I am perfectly safe." He moved away from me, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. I heard the door creak open. A rush of cold air and the scent of many wolves, sweat, leather, horses, invaded our sanctuary. "By the goddess, you are here," a new voice said, relief and something else, something sharp and assessing. "We've been searching the woods for a week. The kingdom is in an uproar." "Your concern is noted, Lord Corbin," Kaelen said, his voice carefully neutral. "As you can see, I survived the rogue attack I reported. I was merely recovering." "Recovering? Alone in this hovel?" Lord Corbin's voice dripped with disdain. I could picture him, a man used to finery, looking with disgust at the dusty cabin. "We must return to Stonehaven immediately." "Your council is in chaos. Important decisions are being delayed. Your absence has been noted." "We will return when I am ready," Kaelen said, and the steel beneath the words was unmistakable. A tense silence followed. I could feel the eyes of the men outside, trying to peer past Kaelen's imposing frame into the dim interior. "Your Majesty," Lord Corbin began again, his tone oily with false concern. "There are also reports, disturbing reports. A fugitive Omega from a southern territory, believed to have been aided by outside influences. Some are whispering about treason, about enemies of the crown using vulnerable pack members to sow discord. It would be prudent to be seen addressing such rumors swiftly." My blood turned to ice. They knew, or they suspected. They were connecting Kaelin's disappearance to me. Kaelin's posture shifted. I could feel the predatory stillness come over him. "Are you accusing me of treason, Lord Corbin?" The question was soft, deadly. Of course not, your majesty. The lord's reply was too quick, too smooth. I merely suggest that harboring a fugitive, however pitiable, could be misconstrued by your enemies. It could be seen as a weakness, a distraction from your royal duties. The woman is under my protection, Kaelen stated, each word a brick in a wall. She is injured and requires care. She will be returning with us to Stonehaven. Your Majesty, surely it would be more appropriate to leave her at the nearest village. The royal court is no place for a blind peasant girl. The contempt in his voice when he said blind was a familiar, poisonous sting. The court is where I decide it is appropriate for my guests to be, Kaelen snapped, his patience clearly fraying. Prepare the horses. We leave within the hour. He shut the door with a firm finality, leaving the cold disapproval outside. The cabin felt suddenly hollow. The fire's warmth couldn't reach the chill settling in my bones. I heard Kalen's heavy sigh before he crossed back to me. Elara, he began, his voice rough. You're the king, I interrupted, my own voice flat. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? He asked gently, kneeling before me. In the forest, as a wolf, or here in this cabin? Would you have accepted my help, or would you have run from me in terror, thinking it some cruel trick? He was right, I would have run. The king was a distant, fearsome figure from stories, a being of law and judgment, not a gentle wolf bringing berries to a lost girl. It changes everything, I whispered. It changes nothing about what I feel, he insisted, taking my hands. The crown is a duty I carry. What I feel for you, that is my truth, my choice. They hate me already and they haven't even seen me, I said, the reality of Lord Corbin's words sinking in. I'm a problem, a distraction, a weakness. Your enemies will use me against you. Let them try, he growled, a hint of the wolf in his voice. My strength is not so fragile that it can be undone by caring for someone. My father ruled for 40 years, and his greatest strength was my mother, a healer he met in a border village. Love is not a weakness, Elara. It is the source of true power. His conviction was a flame in the growing dark of my fear, but I had lived in the shadows of contempt too long to believe it could be so easily banished. The journey to Stonehaven was a blur of discomfort and acute awareness. Kaelen placed me before him on his own horse, a massive, patient stallion, his arms a secure cage around me. I could feel the eyes of the others on us, Lord Corbin's men, the royal guards. Their scrutiny was a physical pressure. Whispers hastily cut off traveled on the wind. Blind, Omega, found with the king. What spell has she cast? Lord Corbin rode close, his presence a constant, cold shadow. He asked pointed questions disguised as polite concern. And where did you say your family is from, my dear? How ever did you manage to survive alone in the woods? Each question was a needle, probing for weakness, for a story that didn't fit. Kaelen answered for me, his replies short and deflective, his body tensing with each interaction. The easy companionship of the cabin was gone, replaced by the stiff protocols of the court, even here in the wilderness. After 2 days of travel, the world began to change. The scent of pine and loam gave way to the smell of smoke, stone, and densely packed lives. The sounds of the forest were replaced by the distant clang of a blacksmith, the murmur of a crowd, the barking of town dogs. The air grew colder, sharper, whistling through what could only be high mountain passes. We're approaching Stonehaven, Kaelen murmured near my ear, his breath warm. It's built into the mountain itself. The gates are hewn from the living rock. Soon after, the sounds multiplied 100-fold. We entered a cavern of noise, shouts, greetings, the thunder of our horses' hooves on cobblestones echoing off close walls. A city, a huge one. The immensity of it was overwhelming, a crushing wave of alien sensation. I shrank back against Kaelin's chest. Make way for the king. A herald's voice boomed. Make way! The crowd's noise swelled cheers, cries of Your Majesty, a tumultuous wave of sound that was somehow more isolating than the silence of the woods. They were cheering for him, for their returned king. And I was a strange, silent appendage clinging to him. We passed through vast, echoing spaces, courtyards, I guessed, before finally stopping. Kaelen dismounted and lifted me down. My legs, stiff from riding, nearly buckled. His hands steadied me, but they were quickly replaced by others, softer, more tentative. Your Majesty, a woman's voice said, warm with relief. Thank the moon, we've been sick with worry. Elena, Kaelen said, and some of the tension left his voice. This is Lady Elara. She is to be given chambers in the royal wing, the sun-facing ones. See that she has everything she requires. Of course, Your Majesty. The woman, Elena, took my arm. Her touch was firm but kind. Welcome to Stonehaven, my lady. Come, let's get you settled. As Elena guided me away, I heard Lord Corbin's voice, low and urgent. Your Majesty, a word in private. The council is assembled. They have questions, particularly about the Omega girl. Lord Thorn is most insistent. I didn't hear Kaelin's reply. Elena was leading me through a labyrinth of corridors, the air growing quieter, cooler. The stone beneath my feet was smooth and polished. Our footsteps echoed. Here we are, Elena said, opening a heavy door. The room within was vast. I could feel the space around me, the high ceiling, the sweep of a floor covered in thick rugs. A fire crackled in a hearth large enough to stand in. The air smelled of beeswax, lavender, and new cloth. It's too much, I breathed. It is your due, my lady, Elena said simply. She guided me to a chair by the fire, a chair so deep and soft I seemed to sink into it. His Majesty was most specific. You are his honored guest. For how long? I asked, the despair finally breaking through. Until his court convinces him his honored guest is an embarrassment? Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but direct. I have served the royal family since I was a girl. I saw King Alistar, his father, rule. I have seen many nobles, many suitors, come through these halls. I have never seen his majesty look at anyone the way he looked at you when he handed you to me. She placed a hand over mine. He sees you, my lady, truly sees you. In this court of sharp eyes and hidden daggers, that is a rare and powerful thing. Do not be so quick to doubt it. Her words were a balm, but they couldn't fully penetrate the chill of the unfamiliar, opulent room or the memory of Lord Corbin's venom. I was in the lion's den, and the only one who believed I belonged here was the king of the lions himself. The question that haunted me as Elena left me alone in the echoing silence was a terrible one. Would his belief be enough to protect us both? Stonehaven was a living, breathing beast of stone and shadow. I learned its rhythms not by sight, but by sound and feel. The pre-dawn scrape of servants' feet in distant halls. The midday bell that echoed through the mountain like a giant's heartbeat. The evening shift in the air as thousands of fires were lit, carrying the scent of wood smoke and roasting meat through the labyrinthine ventilation shafts. My chambers were a gilded cage. Elena was my keeper, kind but firm, a guide through the treacherous social terrain I couldn't see. She described the lavish tapestries, the elegant furniture, the breathtaking view of the valley from my balcony that I would never witness. She helped me dress in silks and soft wools that felt alien against my skin, so different from rough linen. Kaelen was a ghost in my new world. He sent gifts, books with raised markings I couldn't read, delicate sweets, a shawl of impossibly soft cashmere. He visited when he could, but his hours were stolen, brief moments between council meetings and petitions. His voice was always tired, edged with a frustration he tried to hide from me. They are like vultures, he confessed during one such visit, his head in my lap as I sat by the fire. I stroked his hair, feeling the tension coiled in his neck. Corbin, Thorn, the others, every decision is contested, every old alliance questioned. And your presence, it's the weapon they've been waiting for. They call me your blind fascination, I said quietly, repeating the term I'd overheard from a passing maid. They say you're bewitched, that I'm a spy or a curse made flesh. He sat up abruptly, his hands gripping mine. I should have them thrown in the dungeons for such talk, and prove their point that you're irrational where I'm concerned? I shook my head. No, Kaelen, we must be smarter. A new sense was awakening in me, one far more useful than sight in this den of wolves. It had begun as a vague impression in the great hall during my arrival, a prickle of hostility from Lord Corbin, a flicker of genuine curiosity from Alina. Now it was deepening. I could feel the emotions of those around me as distinct colors and textures. Corbin's ambition was a cold, slick oil. The guards' loyalties were warm, steady flames or cool, shifting embers. Alina's affection was a soft, golden glow. It was my grandmother's curse, but twisted into something new. Not just the loss of physical sight, but the gain of a deeper vision. I could see hearts. Tell me about the council, I said, focusing on the practical. Who leads the opposition? Kaelen sighed. Lord Corbin, as you've met, ambitious, connected to the southern silver mines. He wanted his daughter to be queen. Lord Thorn is older, a traditionalist. He doesn't hate you personally, Elara. He hates change. He believes the royal mate must be from an ancient bloodline, proven in battle and politics. My claiming a nameless Omega undermines centuries of tradition he holds sacred. And the others? A few are loyal. Lord Aaron from the coastal Pax is a good man. Lady Moira is shrewd but fair. The rest they sway with the wind. And right now, Corbin and Thorn are creating a gale. He was called away then, a messenger arriving with urgent news. I was left alone with my thoughts and my newfound, unsettling sense. I could feel the palace around me, not as stone, but as a web of simmering emotions greed, fear, loyalty, scorn. I was at the center of the web, a blind spider who could feel every tremble of the strands. The following evening, I was summoned not by Kaelen, but by the council itself. A formal invitation delivered by a stone faced guard. My perspective was requested on a minor border dispute with a neighboring shifter clan, the Mountain Cats. It was a transparent test, a trap. Alina helped me into a formal gown, her hands trembling slightly. Be careful, my lady, she whispered. They will try to make you stumble. The council chamber was a cavern of cold air and colder intentions. I could feel the space, a long table, many bodies, the high, vaulted ceiling swallowing sound. The air was thick with the sense of old books, polished wood, and male aggression barely leashed by protocol. Lady Elara, Lord Corbin's voice slithered across the table. How good of you to join us. We understand you have a unique perspective, having lived so close to the wilderness. This dispute concerns hunting rights in the high pine valleys. The mountain cats claim ancestral rights. Our border patrols claim the territory was ceded after the war. As someone familiar with simple survival, what is your view? The question was designed to humiliate, to highlight my simplicity. I felt the expectant, predatory attention of the room. I felt Kaelin's protective fury beside me, a volcano ready to erupt. I closed my blind eyes and reached out with my other sense. I let the emotions of the room wash over me. Corbin's smug anticipation, Thorn's disdainful curiosity, the anxiety of the younger lords. And beneath it all, from the guard standing behind Lord Aaron, a sharp, focused spike of satisfaction. Not about the debate, about something else. A secret held. I took a slow breath. The question of rights is important, my lords, I began, my voice steady, surprising me. But perhaps we are asking the wrong question. I turned my face toward where I felt the satisfied guard. The man standing behind Lord Aaron. He knows something. Something about the mountain cats that has nothing to do with hunting rights. He is pleased by this conflict. A shocked silence fell. I could feel the guard's satisfaction vanish, replaced by panic. What is this nonsense? Lord Thorne spluttered. Search him, Kaelen commanded, his voice deadly quiet. A scuffle ensued. A moment later, a captain announced, "A message, Your Majesty," hidden in his bracer. Written in the Mountain Cat's clan script. The room erupted. The guard was dragged away. The message, when translated, revealed a plot by a faction within the cats to provoke an incident, hoping the Wolf Council's stubbornness would lead to a skirmish they could use to rally their people. I had not solved the dispute, but I had exposed the poison beneath it. The council's emotional atmosphere shifted dramatically. Shock, then a dawning, uneasy respect. And from Corbin and Thorne, a new, more dangerous emotion, fear. As Kaelin led me from the stunned chamber, his hand on my arm was possessive, proud. "How did you know?" he murmured. "I felt his lie," I said simply. It felt like a splinter in the wood of the room. He stopped, turning me to face him in the empty corridor. His emotions were a torrent: awe, love, fierce pride. "You are not a weakness, Elara. You are a secret weapon they never anticipated." But the victory was fleeting. Later that night, Alina came to my chambers, her usual golden glow dimmed by anxiety. "My lady, there is talk, new talk. They are not calling you a spy anymore." "What are they calling me?" I asked, dread coiling in my stomach. She hesitated. "A witch." The word hung in the air, cold and final. In a world of shifters and moon magic, witch was not a term for a healer or a wise woman. It was an accusation of dark, unnatural power. The kind of power that got people banished or burned. My new sight had saved Kaelin a political disaster, but it had also painted a target on my back brighter than ever. I had shown my fangs. And now, the wolves knew I was not just a helpless rabbit in their midst. I was something unknown. And in a court ruled by tradition and fear, the unknown was the greatest enemy of all. The word witch spread through Stonehaven like a creeping frost. I felt it in the changed demeanor of the servants, their previous cautious pity now edged with genuine fear. I felt it in the corridors, in the way conversations hushed as I passed, leaving behind a residue of suspicion so thick I could taste it, metallic and sour. Kaelin's fury was a contained storm. He issued decrees forbidding the slander, but royal commands cannot change hearts, only silence tongues. The silence became its own kind of accusation. A week after the council incident, the formal reception was announced. A mandatory gathering of all high-ranking nobles to officially welcome back the king and, by extension, to scrutinize his mysterious guest. It was a battlefield in silk and velvet. Alina dressed me in a gown of deep emerald green, the color of the forest, she said. "It makes your hair look like moonlight on snow," she whispered, trying to sound cheerful. But her hands shook as she fastened the clasp of a moonstone necklace around my throat, a gift from Kaelin. "You look like a queen," she said, but the words were a prayer, not a statement. Kaelin came to escort me himself. His emotions were a turbulent sea, protective anger, steely determination, and beneath it, a thread of anxiety he would never voice. He took my arm. "Stay close to me. Say nothing unless you wish to. You owe them nothing." The great hall was an ocean of noise, scent, and seething emotion. Hundreds of people. The air was hot, thick with perfume, sweat, and the smell of roasted meats. The emotional cacophony was overwhelming, a roaring torrent of curiosity, jealousy, hostility, and petty ambitions. I clung to Kaelin's arm, using his solid presence as an anchor in the storm. We processed to a raised dais. The crowd's noise dipped into a respectful hush as we took our seats. I could feel thousands of eyes upon me, a physical pressure. The formalities began. Endless speeches praising Kaelin's safe return, the kingdom's prosperity, the blessed moon. Then, as the feast commenced, the true purpose of the evening revealed itself. Nobles approached the dais to pay respects. Each one was a test. Lady Elara, we hear you have a remarkable intuition. This from a woman whose voice dripped with false honey, her emotional signature a swirl of envy and vicious curiosity. The forest must be a harsh teacher. Tell us, how does one without sight learn to perceive so much? A lord's question, his emotions sharp with intellectual disdain. I answered with careful, neutral politeness, deflecting, thanking them for their concern. Kalen's hand on mine was a vice, his jaw clenched so tight I could feel the tension radiating from him. Then Lord Corbin approached. The hall grew quieter. His emotional aura was different tonight. Not just cold oil, but a focused, gleaming sharpness. A hunter who had sighted his prey. Your Majesty, my lady, he bowed, the picture of deference. A toast to your health and to the unique talents that now grace our court. He raised his goblet. The gesture seemed innocent, but as he did, I felt a violent, sickening pulse of malice not from him, but from the cluster of servants near the wine table. A coordinated spike of dark intent. My new sense flared, a warning shriek. It wasn't about me. It was about the wine, the servants, the toast. Don't drink. The words tore from my throat, loud and raw, cutting through the hall's murmur. Everything froze. Kalen's goblet was halfway to his lips. He lowered it slowly, his eyes locked on me. What is the meaning of this hysterical outburst? Lord Thorne boomed, rising from his seat. The wine, I said, my voice trembling but clear. Servants at the third table. They've poisoned it. I pointed blindly toward the seething knot of dark intent I could feel across the hall. Chaos, shouts, the clatter of goblets being dropped. Guards moved swiftly. There were screams, the sound of a struggle. In the confusion, Lord Corbin's smooth voice cut through. A fascinating performance. The blind witch sees poison in the cup. How very convenient. It's not a performance, Kaelen snarled, standing. His alpha power rolled out, a palpable wave that silenced the room. Guards, detain those servants. Fetch the royal physician. Test every vessel in this hall. Your Majesty, Corbin said, spreading his hands, this proves nothing except the girl's capacity for causing panic. Perhaps she even arranged it herself to appear the savior to tighten her hold on. He never finished. A captain of the guard marched forward, dragging a weeping servant boy. My king, he has confessed, paid by an agent of Lord Corbin to taint the royal wine with wolfsbane. A gasp ripped through the hall. Wolfsbane, slow, agonizing death for our kind, the emotional atmosphere shattered and reformed, shock, horror, and a swift, violent pivot of allegiance. Corbin's carefully cultivated support evaporated as his fellow lords recoiled from the stench of treason. Corbin's mask finally slipped. Fear, then rage, contorted his emotional signature into something ugly and sharp. You think this ends with me? He spat, his polished demeanor gone. You bring this sorceress into our heart, upend our ways, and you think the old blood will simply bow? She is a curse. And you are a fool blinded by it. Seize him, Kaelen commanded, his voice like cracking ice. But Corbin was not alone. From the crowd, a dozen men, his personal guards, and a few loyalist nobles drew weapons. The great hall erupted into violence. It was not a battle of armies, but a brutal, close quarters melee of snapping wolves and clashing steel. I was pulled behind Kaelen as he shifted, his transformation a blast of heat and power. The royal black wolf, a creature of legend, stood between me and the chaos, his roar shaking dust from the rafters. I couldn't see, but I could feel the fight. I felt the flare of pain as a loyal guard fell. I felt the burning aggression of Corbin's men as they fought toward the dais. I felt Kaelin's terrifying, beautiful fury as he tore into them, a force of nature defending his mate. But there were too many. A blade flashed toward Kaelin's exposed flank. I felt the intent, saw it in my mind as clearly as if with eyes. Without thought, I threw myself forward. White-hot fire exploded in my side, not my shoulder this time. Lower, my breath left in a sickening gasp. I collapsed against Kalen's wolf form, my hands scrabbling against his fur, now wet and warm. The sound he made was not a wolf's sound. It was the sound of the world breaking. What happened next was a blur of sensation. A final, enraged surge of power from Kaelen that ended the fighting. Snarls turning to whimpers. Shouts of the queen, she struck. I was lifted, cradled against a human chest, Kaelen, back in his form, his arms trembling. Hold on, Elara, look at me, look at me. But I couldn't see. I could only feel the warm spread of blood, the cold creeping in at the edges, and his desperate, shattered love wrapping around me like a cloak. The physician, now, his voice roared, echoing through the suddenly silent, blood-streaked hall. As darkness seeped into my vision, my last coherent thought was not of pain, but of a strange clarity. The trap had been sprung. The attack had come. And in taking the blow meant for him, I had done more than just save my king. I had, in front of all his doubting nobles, proven the one thing that could never be faked, never be politicized, never be cursed. I had proven a queen's love. The world returned slowly, wrapped in layers of thick, muffling wool. Pain was a distant, rhythmic throb in my side, tethered to the waking world by a thin, persistent thread. Smells came first, the clean, sharp scent of healing herbs, the faint smell of blood, and beneath it, the familiar, anchoring scent of pine and musk. Kaelen. I became aware of a weight on the bed beside me, a large, warm hand cradling mine, calloused thumbs stroking my knuckles. Elara? His voice was raw, scraped hollow with worry. I tried to speak, but my throat was a desert. A cool rim touched my lips and I sipped blessed water. Kaelen, I managed, a cracked whisper. A shuddering breath escaped him. He pressed my hand to his lips, his stubble rough against my skin. Don't ever do that again. Do you hear me? Never. He was behind you, I rasped. I don't care. My life is not worth yours. The ferocity in his voice was absolute. To the kingdom it is, I whispered, but the argument had no strength. The physician came and went, his emotions a blend of professional satisfaction and lingering awe. The blade had missed anything vital, thanks to my awkward, stumbling deflection. A clean wound. She heals with remarkable speed, Your Majesty. I felt his gaze on me, speculative. Almost remarkably. The word hung there, remarkable. Another word for unnatural, for which. But something had shifted. As I recovered over the next few days, the emotional atmosphere of Stonehaven was different. The fear was still there, but it was now laced with something new, a grudging respect, a bewildered awe. The servants who attended me were no longer just afraid. They were curious, almost reverent. The blind Omega had not cast a spell. She had taken a blade for her king. In the brutal code of our world, that action spoke louder than any curse or blessing. Kaelen was a constant presence when his duties allowed. his emotions a steady, warm sun breaking through my pain. But there was a new determination in him, a resolve that had crystallized in the fire of the attack. On the morning I was finally able to sit up without dizziness, he came to me, his energy crackling with purpose. "We're leaving Stonehaven for a few days," he announced. "Leaving, but the council, your duties, can wait." He knelt beside the bed. "There is a place we need to go, a thing we need to do, properly, away from these stone walls and whispering tongues." He wouldn't say more. He simply had me dressed in warm, simple clothes, a far cry from the palace silks, and wrapped in a thick cloak. We rode out with a minimal guard, Kaelen holding me before him on his horse, just as he had when he brought me here. But this journey felt different. The tension was gone. There was only anticipation and a profound sense of homecoming as the sharp, clean scent of the deep forest welcomed us back. I knew where we were going even before he said it. The quality of the silence, the specific chorus of birds, the smell of the water. "The clearing," I breathed, "our cabin." "Our beginning," he corrected softly. He helped me down. My legs were weak, but the forest air was a tonic. He led me to a familiar spot, the soft moss by the stream where he had first found me, a trembling, lost creature. "Kneel with me," he said, his voice gentle but edged with ceremony. We knelt on the earth, facing each other. I could hear the stream, the wind in the pines. I could feel the moon above, though it was daytime. Her presence was a constant hum in my blood, in his. "Elara," he began, his voice formal, yet trembling with a depth of feeling that made my heart ache. "Here, in this place where I first knew you, not as a king knows a subject, but as one soul recognizes its counterpart, I ask you, away from crowns and councils and the politics of men, will you be my mate? Not just my queen by law, but my heart's sovereign by choice? Will you bind your life to mine, under the moon, I, in the sight of the ancient trees that sheltered us?" Tears streamed down my face, cool in the forest air. This was the question that mattered. Not the coronation oaths that would come later, but this primal, sacred vow. "Yes," I said, the word a sob of pure joy. "Yes, Kaelen, always." He took my hands. "Then by the grace of the goddess, before these witnesses of wood and water, I claim you as my own, and I give myself to you." He leaned forward, and his lips found mine. This kiss was not like the first, desperate and questioning in the cabin. This was a seal, a promise. As our lips met, the mate bond, which had been a gentle thrum between us, ignited into a brilliant, unbreakable cord of golden light in my soul's sight. I gasped against his mouth, overwhelmed by the sheer rightness of it, the completion. We pulled apart, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. The forest itself seemed to sigh in approval. From his pocket, he drew something cool and smooth, a necklace. He fastened it around my throat. Not a moonstone or a gem, but a simple, perfect circle of polished dark wood, hung on a leather cord. "From the oak that guards this clearing," he murmured. "A crown of the forest for my forest queen." I touched the wooden circle, my fingers tracing its endless loop. It was worth more than any diamond. It was a piece of our sanctuary, a symbol of where our true power had been forged. We stayed in the clearing until dusk, talking, planning, simply being together in the peace we had carved for ourselves. The cabin was too damaged from the search party's rough entry, so we didn't go inside. It didn't matter. The clearing was the true heart of it all. As we rode back to Stonehaven in the violet twilight, I felt different. I was no longer Elara, the fugitive Omega. I was Elara, mate of the Alpha King. The bond was a solid, singing truth inside me, a compass that would always point me to him. The fears of the court, the whispers, the politics, they hadn't vanished, but they had shrunk. They were problems of the man, not the mate. And we would face them together. The return to the palace was met with a new kind of silence. The guards stood taller. The servants bowed deeper. They could sense it, I realized. They could feel the change in Kaelen, the settled, immovable certainty in his aura. And they could likely feel the new, potent bond humming between us, a palpable force in the stone corridors. Elena met us in my chambers, her emotions a bright swirl of joy and relief. Welcome home, my lady, my queen. The title in her mouth felt earned. Later, as Kaelin and I stood on my balcony listening to the kingdom settle into night, I leaned against him. They know something has changed. They know I am complete, he said, his arms around me. And a complete king is a strong king. Corbin's plot, your sacrifice, our bonding, it has purged a sickness from the court. The loyal are emboldened, the ambitious are recalculating, and the fearful, he kissed the top of my head. The fearful are beginning to see not a witch, but a woman who loves their king enough to die for him. That is a language even the most traditional heart understands. I looked up at the sky I couldn't see, feeling the moon's silver gaze. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Coronations, treaties, the endless work of rule, but the foundation was now unshakable. It was not built on stone, but on moss and stream water, and a bond forged in wilderness and sealed in blood. We had found our way through the darkest woods. Now, we would build a kingdom from the light we'd found there. Stonehaven, in the wake of the bonding and Corbin's fall, was a kingdom holding its breath. The blatant treason had consolidated Kaelin's authority in a way years of steady rule had not. Lords who had wavered now fell over themselves to proclaim loyalty. The air, once thick with subtle poisons, now crackled with a nervous, watchful energy. And I was at the center of it, no longer just the blind fascination, but the queen consort, mate of the king. My recovery became a public affair. Well-wishers and curiosity seekers streamed through the receiving rooms. I sat beside Kaelin, learning to navigate the endless river of names, titles, and hidden agendas. My new sense, my seeing heart, became my most crucial tool. It was exhausting, like listening to 100 conversations at once, but it was invaluable. I could feel Lord Aaron's sincere goodwill, a steady, warm pulse. I could sense Lady Moira's shrewd assessment, a cool, sharp intellect weighing my usefulness. And I could detect, like a faint, rotten smell beneath perfume, the lingering resentment from those like Thorn, who accepted my position but not my person. Kaelin relied on my intuition more and more. In private counsel, he would ask, "What do you feel from him, Elara?" Before making an appointment, I became his secret counselor, the one who could see the truth behind the words. But the gift was a double-edged sword. The more I used it, the more the rumors of witchcraft evolved. They weren't shouts now, but whispers. She reads minds. She knows your secret thoughts. The king is guided by a seer. For some, it inspired fear. For others, a dangerous curiosity. One afternoon, a delegation arrived from the distant, insular Moonstone Peaks pack. Their alpha, a gruff old wolf named Gorin, had resisted closer ties with the Central Kingdom for decades. His arrival was a major diplomatic event, and his skepticism was a physical wall in the room. The feast in his honor was a tense affair. Goran's emotions were like granite, hard, unmoving, deeply suspicious. He answered Kaelin's overtures with grunts, his eyes, I was told by Alina, constantly flicking to me with open distrust. During a lull, his beta, a younger man with a clever, restless energy, approached me. "My queen," he said, bowing. His voice was smooth, but his emotional signature was a tangled knot of ambition and calculation. "We hear tales of your perceptiveness. They say you helped uncover a great treason. I was fortunate to be of service to my king," I said carefully, feeling Kaelin's attention sharpen beside me. "Indeed, The beta leaned closer, his voice dropping. My alpha is a stubborn old tree. He sees new vines and thinks only of strangulation. But I see opportunity. A stronger union with Stonehaven could bring great prosperity to our peaks. His emotions shimmered with a greedy, personal desire for that prosperity for himself. Perhaps, with your unique insight, you could help persuade him of the benefits, a word in the right ear, an insight into his concerns. It was a bribe, an offer to become his political tool wrapped in flattery. I felt a cold slick of disgust. This was the other side of my gift, not just seeing truth, but being seen as a weapon to acquire it. My insight is not for sale, Beta, I said, my voice quiet but clear. Nor is it a tool for manipulation. True alliance is built on mutual benefit and honest dealing, not whispered secrets. His friendly facade cracked, revealing a flash of irritation before he smoothed it over. Of course, my queen, a noble sentiment. He bowed and retreated, his emotional knot now tight with anger and thwarted ambition. Later, in our private chambers, Kaelen was furious. I'll have him sent back in chains for daring to proposition you like a common spy. No, I said, gripping his arm. That would only prove Goran's fear that you are swayed by me, and it would make the beta a martyr. We must be smarter. I told Kaelen what I had felt from the old Alpha himself, not hostility toward the kingdom, but a deep, protective fear for his pack's independence, a weary distrust of smooth words from the lowlands. He doesn't need to be tricked or manipulated, Kaelen. He needs to be heard. He needs to know an alliance with you won't mean being swallowed whole. The next day, Kaelen changed his approach. He dismissed the formal council and asked to walk the battlements with Goran alone. He spoke not of taxes and trade agreements, but of borders, of honor, of the weight of protecting one's people. He offered not absorption, but a pact of mutual defense and fair trade. He spoke as one alpha to another, respecting the older wolf's granite strength. I stood with Alina in the garden below, feeling the shift in the emotional weather high on the walls. Goran's granite resistance began to soften, not into submission, but into the first cracks of respect. The calculating beta's presence was a sour, diminishing note beside this new, straightforward harmony. When they descended, Goran's steps were lighter. He stopped before me. My queen, he said, his voice still gruff but without the edge of disdain. Your king speaks with a straight tongue. It is refreshing. He paused, and I felt his keen gaze on my face. They say you see what others miss. Did you advise him to speak to me thus? I smiled. I advised him only to be the king he is, Lord Goran, a king who values strength and honesty above easy flattery. A grunt that might have been a laugh. HMPH, perhaps there is more to you than moontails and whispers. He gave a short, respectful nod before moving on. It was a small victory, but a significant one. We hadn't used my gift as a weapon, but as a compass. We had seen the true obstacle and addressed it with integrity, not manipulation. That night, Kaelen held me close. You were right, he murmured into my hair. You saw his heart, not his politics. That is your true power, Elara. Not witchcraft, not espionage, compassionate clarity. But the beta's proposition haunted me. He would not be the last to see my ability as a thing to be bought or used. My seeing heart had saved us from poison and treason, and it had helped forge an alliance. But it also made me a target in a new, more subtle game. I had to learn to wield this double-edged gift not just for Kaelen, but for the good of the kingdom itself. To see truths, but also to guide us toward the light they revealed, not the shadows they cast. The crown on my head was of polished wood, but the one in my soul was being forged in the fire of every choice, every perceived truth. And its weight, I was learning was the weight of countless hearts placed in my care. The change was subtle at first. A lingering scent of pine in my chambers that had nothing to do with the fire. A sudden, intense craving for wild berries in the dead of winter, a craving so strong it brought tears to my eyes. And then, the dreams. Vivid, pulsing dreams not of darkness, but of swirling, brilliant colors and shapes I had no names for. I dreamed of a wolf with fur like spun moonlight and eyes that held the depth of a starry sky. It would run through forests of silver trees, and I could see it, not with the sole sight of emotions, but with a startling, impossible visual clarity that vanished the moment I woke, leaving only a ghost of light behind my eyelids. I knew what it meant. The healer confirmed it with a voice trembling not with fear, but with awe. A child, your majesty, the royal heir. The signs they are strong, extraordinarily so. Kaelen's reaction was pure, unadulterated joy. He lifted me and spun me, his laughter echoing in the chambers, his emotions a sunburst of pride and wonder. But beneath his joy, I felt his flicker of the same awe the healer had shown, and something else, a protective ferocity that made the air crackle. The news spread through Stonehaven like wildfire. An heir, the continuation of the Ravenclaw line, the court, still settling after the recent storms, erupted in celebration. But within the cheers, my seeing heart detected the old, familiar undercurrents, now flowing in new channels. For the traditionalists like Lord Thorne, an heir solidified the dynasty, a cause for genuine relief. His respect for me, once grudging, warmed by several degrees. The child was a symbol of stability, but for others, the pregnancy was a new variable in their calculations. The heir would be not just of Kaelin's powerful royal blood, but of mine. The cursed blood, the blind Omega's blood. What traits would it carry? My blindness, my strange sight, the potential for power or for perceived weakness multiplied exponentially. I began to feel new eyes upon me. Speculative, calculating. The beta from Moonstone Peaks had seen me as a tool. Now, factions within our own court began to see my unborn child as a prize to be influenced, a future king or queen to be shaped. My physical world shrank as Kaelen, in his overprotective fervor, limited my public appearances. But my inner world expanded wildly. The child was a tiny, bright sun in my soul's sight, its presence a constant, gentle hum. And as it grew, so did my gift. It was no longer just about feeling emotions. I began to get flashes, impressions of people's intentions before they acted, glimpses of the immediate future as a series of potential paths branching from a single moment. One afternoon, as Elena guided me through the royal gardens, I felt a sharp, malicious focus from a young gardener kneeling by the frost-killed rose bushes. His emotions were a tangled mess of resentment and a cold, sharp purpose. I didn't just feel his dislike, I saw a flash, his hand tightening around a trowel, not to dig, but to strike upward as Elena passed. "Elena, stop!" I gasped, pulling her back. At that moment, the boy lurched forward, the metal trowel flashing where her ankle would have been. Guards were on him instantly. He wasn't an assassin, just a bitter youth whose family had lost status after Corbin's fall, aiming to hurt the queen's favorite in a petty act of revenge. But the intent had been clear, and I had seen it. The incident sent Kaelen into a rage. Security doubled. My world became a smaller, softer prison. The weight of protection was suffocating. "I am not a fragile doll," I argued with him that night. "This gift, it protects me, it protects us." I saw that boy's intent as clearly as you see a drawn sword. And if you're overwhelmed, distracted, what if the next threat is one you don't see coming because our child decides to kick at that moment? His fear was a living thing in the room. a fear I shared but couldn't surrender to. The tension came to a head during a small, private gathering with the few lords Kaelen trusted most. I was feeling unwell, the child restless, my senses overloaded by the mingled auras in the room. A discussion about border patrols became a heated debate. Lord Aaron and Lady Moira argued strategy, their emotions flaring, Aaron's passionate, Moira's icily logical. And then, as their voices rose, I saw it. Not with my heart, but in my mind. A clear, terrible image. Lord Aaron, in wolf form, falling from a rocky outcrop on the disputed border, an arrow in his shoulder. The vision was followed by a wave of crippling nausea and a piercing pain behind my eyes. I cried out, doubling over. The room fell silent. Elara, Kaelen was at my side. The Western Pass, I gasped, gripping his arm, the vision seared into my mind. 3 days from now, Aaron must not lead the patrol there. It's an ambush. I saw him fall. The room went deathly still. Lady Mora's sharp intellect turned from the argument to me, probing, analyzing. Lord Aaron's passion cooled into shock. You saw this? Lord Thorne asked, his voice hushed. As clearly as I see your suspicion, my lord, I said weakly, the pain receding to a throb. It was too much, too specific, too witchy. Even for our allies, the boundary between remarkable intuition and terrifying prophecy had been crossed. Kaelen, however, acted without hesitation. He changed the patrol's route and commander. 3 days later, a scout returned with news. An ambush had been laid in the Western Pass by rogue remnants of Corbin's allies. Our altered patrol had flanked and captured them. The proof was incontrovertible. I had not just felt a mood, I had foreseen a concrete event and saved a life. The court's reaction was a schism. For some, my status elevated to the mystical. I was a seer, a prophetess, a living blessing to the kingdom. For others, the fear solidified into terror. What I possessed was no longer just an acute empathy. It was a power that defied the natural order. A power that could, in the wrong light, look exactly like the curse they had always whispered about. That night, cradled in Kaelin's arms, the child calm within me, I voiced the fear we both felt. They will never look at our child and see just a boy or a girl. They will see a symbol, a vessel for whatever power they think I have. They will want to claim it, control it, or destroy it. Kaelin's hand rested on my abdomen, his touch infinitely gentle. Then we will be their shield. We will teach them strength. We will teach them that this gift, their heritage, is not a curse or a weapon, but a responsibility. To see truth is a heavy burden. He kissed my temple, but it is also a beautiful one. You have shown me that. The air of shadow and light was coming. It would be born into a world that feared and coveted its bloodline in equal measure. Our battles were not over, they were evolving. We were no longer just fighting for acceptance of a blind queen, but for the future of a child who might see more than anyone ever had. The greatest test of our reign, of our love, was still ahead. And it would arrive with the first cry of our newborn, carrying with it all the hopes, fears, and blinding visions of a kingdom waiting to be born anew. The final months of my pregnancy were a season of suspended time. Stonehaven, under a heavy blanket of snow, turned inward. The frantic energy of court politics seemed to hibernate, muffled by the white silence. It was a calm, but the kind of calm that sits in the eye of a storm, heavy, watchful, and fragile. My world had contracted to the royal suite. Kaelin's protectiveness was a fortress around me, his love the warm fire within it. My seeing heart, amplified by the life growing inside me, became both a blessing and a curse. I could feel the child's dreams, swirls of color and sound, pulses of pure, undifferentiated emotion. Love, curiosity. A fierce, nascent will. but I could also feel the castle. Not just the people, but the very stones seemed to hum with anticipation. Whispers slithered under doors, not of malice, but of intense speculation. What will the child be? A powerful alpha like its father? A seer like its mother? Or something else entirely? The air was a blank scroll upon which every faction was already writing their hopes and fears. My prophetic flashes became more frequent, but also more fragmented and harder to interpret. I saw a raven circling the highest tower under a double moon. I felt the cold kiss of an unseen metal. I heard a lullaby sung in a voice that was both mine and not mine. They were pieces of a puzzle from a future I couldn't yet assemble. Lord Thorn, of all people, became an unexpected anchor. His traditionalism now manifested as a fierce dedication to the purity of the royal succession. My child was that succession, and therefore, to be protected at all costs. He took it upon himself to vet every servant, guard, and healer who came near me, his skepticism a useful filter against potential threats. His emotions toward me were still a complex knot of respect and bafflement, but toward the air, they were as solid and uncompromising as granite. Lady Moira visited often, her sharp mind treating my condition as a fascinating strategic variable. The child's birth will recalibrate all alliances, she stated one afternoon, her voice like cutting crystal. Those waiting in the shadows will be forced to act, either in support or opposition. The ambiguity will end. It is, in its way, a useful event. You speak of my child as a political earthquake, I said, a hand resting on the hard curve of my belly. I speak of reality, my queen. You of all people should appreciate clarity. There was no malice in her, only a ruthless pragmatism that was, in its own way, a form of loyalty. Kaelen tried to hide his anxiety from me, but our bond hummed with it. He spent hours with the captain of the guard, planning defenses, contingencies. He had the royal healer, an elderly, unflappable woman named Anya, move into an adjoining chamber. His love was a constant, warm pressure, but the strain of waiting, of anticipating an attack from an unknown direction, was wearing on him. The breaking point of the calm came on a night of howling wind. The storm screamed around the mountain peaks, and I couldn't sleep. The child was restless, and my senses were stretched taut, picking up the frayed nerves of every guard on the battlements. Then a new feeling pierced through the storm's chaos. Not fear or malice. Grief, deep, profound, soul-rending grief coming from the direction of the courtyard. It was so powerful it stole my breath. Kaelen, I whispered, shaking him awake. Something S happened, down in the courtyard, something terrible. He was alert instantly. He didn't question me. He threw on a cloak and was gone, issuing quiet orders to the guards outside our door. He returned an hour later, his emotions a maelstrom of sorrow and grim anger. He came to the bed, his clothes smelling of snow and blood. "Rogues," he said, his voice hollow. "A small band desperate. They attacked a supply sled trying to make it through the pass before the storm hit. The guards repelled them, but we lost 2 men. One was young. Had a mate here in the kitchens. She just heard. The grief I had felt, it had been hers, a wound so fresh and violent it had reverberated through the stone to reach me. I began to cry for the lost men, for the grieving woman, for the relentless cruelty of a world that sent violence even in the heart of a snowstorm. Kaelen held me, his own tears hot against my hair. "This is what I fear," he murmured. "This violence, this loss. How do I bring a child into this? How do I protect you both from a world that never stops throwing sharp edges?" It was the question haunting us both. My gift showed me glimpses of futures and the secrets of hearts, but it couldn't stop a blade or a rogue's tooth. His power commanded armies and shaped laws, but it couldn't stop a single arrow in the dark. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving a world of blinding, silent white. The grief in the castle was a subdued, respectful thing. I asked Alina to take me to the kitchens. I found the young Omega woman, her soul a shattered, gray landscape. I didn't offer platitudes. I simply took her hands and let her feel the echo of my own sorrow, my understanding. I couldn't heal her loss, but I could witness it. She didn't need a queen in that moment. She needed another heart that could feel the break in hers. She clung to my hands and wept, and her gray grief slowly bled into a painful, but living, ache. As we left the kitchens, I felt a new emotion directed at me from the gathered staff. It wasn't awe or fear, it was kinship. I had stepped out of my silken prison and into their raw pain. I had seen them, not with my strange sight, but with a shared humanity. Walking back through the sunlit, snow-bright corridors, a new fragment of vision came to me. Not of danger, but of a moment years hence. I saw a boy with hair like pale wheat, his eyes the storm gray of his father's, sitting in these very kitchens, listening wide-eyed as the same cook told him stories, her grief long soothed into memory. He was learning the kingdom not from scrolls, but from its people. I stopped, placing a hand on the cold stone wall. "What is it?" Elena asked, concerned. "A good future," I whispered, a smile touching my lips for the first time in days. Just a glimpse of a good future. The calm was over. The storm of the birth was coming. But the incident in the snow had reminded me of something vital. Our strength wasn't just in foreseeing threats or wielding power. It was in this, in the connections between hearts, in the shared burden of grief and joy. Our child would inherit not just a crown or a curse, but a people. And perhaps learning to see them truly, as I was learning to do, would be the greatest protection of all. The final wait began. The pieces were in place, the guards were doubled, the healer was ready. Kaelin's anxiety was a live wire. My body was a vessel stretched to its limit. And the future, a thousand branching paths of light and shadow, was rushing toward us with the relentless beat of my own heart. The calm was shattered. Now we would meet what came next. The pain was a universe. It was the primal fire at the heart of the world, and I was trapped within it, burning and being forged anew. Time lost all meaning. There was only the contraction and release, the roar of my own blood in my ears, and Kaelin's voice, a steady, desperate anchor in the maelstrom. "I'm here, my love, I'm here, breathe." He was supposed to be in the council chamber, according to tradition. But tradition had shattered the moment I'd clutched his tunic, my waters breaking in a rush, and gasped, "Don't you dare leave me." He hadn't. He swept me into his arms and barked orders that sent the entire royal wing into controlled pandemonium. Now he knelt by the bed, his face pressed against my hand, his other hand a warm, grounding pressure on my back as healer Anya and Alina guided me. His emotions were a torrent, terror, awe, a love so vast it threatened to drown us both. My seeing heart was turned entirely inward, a slave to the animal process of my body. But in the spaces between the waves of agony, flashes of something else came. Not prophecy, but perception amplified to a blinding degree. I could feel the life force of every person in the room, Anya's calm, skilled energy, Alina's fervent prayers, the guards' focused vigilance outside the door like a wall of disciplined flame. And Kaelen was a supernova of protective need. And the child. Oh, the child. Its presence was a small, determined star, pushing toward the world, its emotions a pure, vibrant cocktail of struggle and imminent triumph. "The child comes now, Your Majesty." Anya's voice was calm but urgent. One more, the crowning push. I had no strength, I was ash and pain. But Kaelin's voice found me in the void. Elara, look at me. I turned my sightless face toward him. Our story began in the dark. You taught me to see in it. Now bring our child into the light. I am with you. We are with you. His words were a spark. I gathered the shattered pieces of my will. I reached not for physical strength, but for that bond, for the love that was our true foundation. I pulled from his strength, from the steady flame of the guards, from the prayers of Alina, from the ancient, knowing peace of Anya. I drew it all in, a queen claiming the power of her people. With a cry that tore from the deepest part of my soul, I pushed. There was a final, rending sensation, a release of pressure so profound it felt like flying apart. And then silence, a heartbeat of absolute, terrifying silence. And then a sound. A thin, furious, indignant wail that filled the chamber, vibrated in the stones, and echoed in the very core of my being. Our child's first cry. A sob ripped from Kaelen's throat. A son, he choked out, his voice thick with tears. Elara, we have a son. I collapsed back, spent, trembling, as the sounds of bustling activity surrounded me, the snip of a cord, the soft murmurs of the women. Then a warm, wriggling, damp bundle was placed on my chest. I felt him. Small, perfect. His skin was impossibly soft, his tiny fingers clutching instinctively at my gown. His cry softened to a disgruntled whimper. And his emotions, they were a shock of cool, clear water in my parched soul. Not the formless colors of the womb, but distinct, bright sparks. Outrage, then curiosity. Then, as he settled against my heartbeat, a dawning, profound sense of home. I traced his face with trembling fingers, a thatch of damp, fine hair, a tiny, perfect nose, a mouth that already seemed to have his father's stubborn set. He has your hair, Kaelen whispered, his own hand joining mine, his touch reverent, and 10 perfect fingers and toes, and his eyes, Alara, his voice broke. He's opening them. I held my breath. My blindness was my curse, my gift. Would it be his? What color? I whispered. Kaelen was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, wonder filled his voice to overflowing. They're changing, from the blue of all newborns to a pale, silvery gray, like morning mist, like moonlight on water. Moonlight, the goddess's own light. A fresh, different kind of tear spilled down my cheek, not of sorrow, but of a hope so fierce it was painful. Can he? I couldn't finish. As if in answer, my son turned his head, his cheek nuzzling against my skin. And in that touch, a new connection snapped into place. Not just the physical bond of mother and child, or the blood bond of lineage. It was a thread of my soul's sight extending to him. I didn't see his eyes, but I felt his perception. He was looking at my face, and in his nascent consciousness, I felt a recognition. Not of my features, but of my essence, the essence of love, of safety. And then he showed me something, a tiny, bright pulse like a reflection of my own inner sight. It was dormant, a seed, but it was there. He is perfect, I breathed, kissing his downy head. Our perfect boy. Kaelen leaned down, kissing me, then our son. His name, he said, his voice firm now, ringing with kingly authority. His name is Lysander. It means liberator of men. He will liberate this kingdom from fear, from darkness. He will be a new kind of king. Lysander, the name settled over him like a blessing. The door opened cautiously. Lord Thorne, Lady Moira, and a few other senior council members had been waiting in the antechamber. They entered, their emotions a storm of anticipation and anxiety. Kaelen stood, though he kept a hand on my shoulder. Behold, he said, his voice carrying through the room. Lysander of the House Ravenclaw, crown prince and heir to the wolf throne. There was a collective intake of breath. Then, the sound of knees hitting stone. Lord Thorne was the first to bow, his head dipping low, his granite emotions softened by a genuine, overwhelming relief. The goddess be praised, the line continues. As they rose, Lysander let out another small cry. I felt his discomfort, too many new, overwhelming energies in the room. Instinctively, I drew on my own gift, not to see, but to project a sense of calm, of peace toward him. His crying subsided. Lady Moira's sharp intellect focused on me, then on the child. He is strong, she observed, and quieted quickly, a good sign. But I felt her unasked question hanging in the air. What can he do? What did he inherit? I looked up, though I couldn't see her. He inherits a kingdom that is learning to see with more than just eyes, I said, answering her silent query. He inherits love. That is the first and greatest of his gifts. The official announcements were made. The bells of Stonehaven began to ring, a joyous, clamorous song that rolled down the mountain and across the snow-covered valley. The kingdom had its heir. Exhaustion finally claimed me. As I drifted to sleep, Lysander a warm, sleeping weight on my chest, Kaelin's hand in my hair, I had one last, clear fragment of vision. Not of the distant future, but of tomorrow. I saw myself standing on the balcony, the winter sun on my face, holding Lysander up to the light. And below, in the courtyard, a sea of faces turned upward, not in fear or scrutiny, but in hope. Their emotions were a warm, rising tide of joy, a collective breath of relief and new beginning. The crown of breath and cry had been won. The storm of birth was over. Now, the slow, beautiful, terrifying work of raising a prince, of ruling a kingdom, of living a destiny chosen in a forest clearing, could truly begin. Our story had not reached its end. It had just discovered its most important beginning. Lysander's first months were a quiet revolution within Stonehaven. The frantic speculation didn't cease, but it was tempered by the sheer, mundane wonder of a newborn. His needs were simple, his presence a potent source of light that seemed to soften the castle's hardest edges. My world, once defined by the vast, intimidating scale of the kingdom, shrank to the intimate geography of his tiny body, the curve of his cheek, the grip of his hand, the soft sounds of his sleep. My seeing heart, which had once scanned for threats and intrigues, now focused on the radiant, simple spectrum of his emotions: hunger, contentment, curiosity, a pure, undiluted joy that felt like sunlight on my soul. He was, by all accounts, a beautiful child. Alina described his hair turning to pale gold like ripe wheat, his eyes settling into that unusual, luminous silver gray. He watches everything, my lady, she told me, her voice soft. Not like a baby who simply looks. He observes as if he's thinking deep thoughts. I felt it too. When I held him, our connection was more than mother and child. The thread of soul sight between us was a living thing. He couldn't communicate in words, but he shared impressions: the bright blur of a torch flame, the comforting solidity of Kaelin's voice, the soft texture of my gown. In return, I poured love and calm into him, a steady stream to anchor his new, overwhelming world. Kaelen was a transformed man. The fearsome alpha king melted into putty in his son's tiny hands. He would spend hours with Lysander asleep on his chest, reading royal decrees in a low murmur, or simply watching him with an expression of such naked wonder it made my heart ache. The weight of the crown seemed lighter when he spoke of the future Lysander would inherit. I will build a kingdom worthy of him, he vowed one night, his finger caught in Lysander's fierce little grip. A kingdom of law, but also of compassion. He will not have to fight the battles we have fought. But the outside world did not stand still. Lysander's birth had stabilized the internal court, but it had also sent ripples across the borders. Neighboring shifter clans sent envoys with gifts, their intentions a mixed bouquet in my senses, some genuine congratulations, others veiled assessments of the new heir's potential strength. The most significant arrival was a delegation from the elusive Starlight Fox clan, ethereal shifters known for their wisdom and reclusiveness. Their ambassador, an ancient female named Sira, requested a private audience with me. She was brought to my solar, where I sat with Lysander nursing. Her presence was like a cool, clear night, calm, ancient, and tinged with a powerful, subtle magic that felt different from wolf power. Queen Elara, she greeted, her voice the sound of wind through dry leaves. And the new dawn, may I? At my nod, she approached. I felt her slender, cool hand hover over Lysander's head, not touching him. A pulse of something, an energy both probing and respectful, washed over him. Lysander stopped feeding and turned his head toward her, his silver eyes wide. Through our bond, I felt his fascination. He showed me an impression of Sira, not as an old woman, but as a constellation of gentle, silver light. Ah, Sira breathed, a sound of deep satisfaction. As we sensed, the threads of fate are woven tightly here. What do you mean? I asked, holding Lysander closer. Your son carries a rare gift, child of the moon and the deep earth, she said. He sees the weave, the connections between all living things. It is a gift my people sometimes bear, one that brings great understanding but also great burden. He will not just see hearts as you do, he will see the tapestry itself. Her words sent a chill through me. My gift was challenging enough. His sounded like a weight no child should bear. Can you help him? The question was a plea. Teach him. Sira was silent for a long moment. The Fox clan does not involve itself in wolf politics, but the weave, it transcends clans. We will watch. When he is older, if the gift unfolds as it seems it will, we may send a guide. For now, love him. Ground him in the simple, solid things. The weave can be a lonely place without an anchor to the earth. Her advice was cryptic but felt true. After she left, I held Lysander, pouring all my love into our bond, trying to be his anchor. As the weeks passed, small signs emerged. Flowers in a vase would tilt toward him as he passed in Alina's arms. An agitated hound in the courtyard would come when brought near him. Once, when Lord Thorn was visiting, frustrated by a stubborn trade negotiation, Lysander, playing on a rug, babbled and reached toward a map. His tiny finger landed not on the disputed territory, but on a smaller, forgotten village that, as it turned out, held the key to a compromise. Coincidence, the court murmured, the luck of a blessed child, but I knew, and Kaelen, watching with a father's keen eye, was beginning to suspect. The true test came during the spring festival, Lysander's first public appearance since his birth. The main square of Stonehaven was packed, a roaring sea of sound and emotion. Kaelen held Lysander high, presenting him to the people. The cheers were deafening. And then, a shift. A cart horse, spooked by the noise, reared up at the edge of the crowd. Panic spiked a sharp, collective scream. The crowd surged dangerously. In my arms, where I stood beside Kaelen, Lysander stiffened. He didn't cry. His silver eyes grew distant, fixed on nothing. Through our bond, I was suddenly inundated not with his fear, but with a dizzying, panoramic view of the square. Not of images, but of connections. I felt the threads of panic linking person to person, the snapping tension of the horse's terror, the solid, disciplined lines of the guards trying to contain the chaos. And then, from Lysander, a pulse. A gentle, calming wave of intent. It wasn't a command. It was a suggestion woven into the very air, a whisper along those threads of connection. Be calm, be still. The effect was not magical domination. It was subtle. The horse's rear slowed, its hooves settling. The panic in the crowd didn't vanish, but it fractured, replaced by confusion, then a gradual settling. The guards regained control seamlessly. The square grew quiet, then the cheering began again, this time with a note of bewildered relief. A lucky break, everyone said. The horse just tired itself out. But Kaelen looked from the calm crowd to our son, whose eyes had refocused, now looking tired and seeking my face. Kalen's emotions were a storm of realization, pride, and a new, profound protectiveness. Later, in our chambers with Lysander asleep, Kaelen took my hands. What he did today. I felt it, I whispered. He didn't force anything. He reminded them of their own peace. Syrah was right, Kaelen said, his voice full of awe. He sees the weave, and he can touch it. He looked at our sleeping son, his expression fierce. We must protect this. Not just him, but his gift. The world is not ready for such power. They would either worship him as a god or destroy him as a demon. I nodded, the weight of it settling on me. Our task was clearer than ever. We had to raise a prince who could one day rule a kingdom, while shepherding a gift that could reshape the world. We had to teach him strength without arrogance, compassion without vulnerability, and how to wield a power that was meant to heal, not to dominate. Lysander, our Prince of Dawn, had brought a new light to the kingdom. But with that light came the revelation of a shadow path we must now carefully navigate. His reign would not simply be inherited. It would be woven, thread by delicate thread, from the fabric of connections only he could truly see. And our job was to ensure that, when he finally took the crown, he would weave a tapestry of peace, not of control. The most delicate and important battle of our lives had just begun, and it was fought not with swords, but with lullabies, lessons, and the limitless, terrifying potential of a child's love. 5 years unfurled like a tapestry rich with both bold, joyful colors and subtle, somber threads. Lysander grew from a babe in arms to a thoughtful, quiet child with a gravity that often startled those who met him. His silver eyes, now the color of a twilight sky, seemed to hold knowledge far beyond his years. Our connection remained, a private language of shared impressions and emotions. He learned to shield his gift from the constant buzz of the world to focus it. With me, he didn't need to. He would sit with me in the garden, his small hand in mine, and show me what he saw, not the visual beauty of a rose, but the humming, sun-warmed life force within it, its connection to the soil and the bee hovering nearby. He saw the world as a living, breathing web, and he shared its poetry with me. His public role was carefully managed. He was the beloved prince, appearing at festivals, learning statecraft at his father's side. The incident at the square was remembered as a moment of fortunate calm. The deeper truth was known only to Kaelen, me, healer Anya, and a fiercely loyal inner circle that now included a subdued, but devoted Lord Thorn and the ever-analytical Lady Moira. The Starlight Fox clan kept their distance, but occasionally a token would arrive, a polished stone that hummed with quiet energy, a book of constellations written in raised markings I could feel. They were watching, waiting. Lysander's first true lesson in the burden of his gift came not from a threat, but from a friendship. He befriended the son of a stable master, a boisterous, kind-hearted boy named Bren. To Lysander, Bren was a sunburst of uncomplicated joy, a anchor point in the sometimes overwhelming tapestry. One day, Bren fell from a hayloft, breaking his arm. The pain was a shrieking red thread in Lysander's perception, and the boy's fear was a choking vine. Without thinking, 5-year-old Lysander ran to him, placed his small hands on Bren's injured arm, and did what came naturally. He tried to smooth the ragged, painful threads to mend the break in the pattern of his friend's well-being. He couldn't heal it, not physically. But Bren later told his father, through tears, that the prince touched it and the scary part went away. The pain had diminished, not vanished, but the terror had been soothed. The stable master, a practical man, thought it the effect of shock and a prince's kind attention. But Kaelen and I saw the aftermath. Lysander was pale, exhausted, a slight nosebleed staining his tunic. He had taken some of his friend's distress into himself to ease it. That night, we had our first difficult talk with our son. We sat by his bed, the moonlight painting his room silver. What you did for Bren was kind, Kaelen began, his voice gentle. But you hurt yourself. Lysander's lower lip trembled. His thread was screaming, Papa. I just wanted to make it quiet. My heart broke. I took his hand. You have a beautiful gift, my dawn child. You can see how everything is connected, but you are part of that web too. If you pull too hard on one thread to fix it, you can strain your own. Your thread is precious to us. To the kingdom. He thought about this, his young mind grappling with the metaphor. So, I can't help? You can always help, Kaelen said firmly. But sometimes helping means getting a healer or holding a hand or just being there. You don't have to carry the hurt yourself. Your strength is in seeing the connections, not in bearing all their weight. It was a complex lesson for a child, but Lysander absorbed it. He began to learn the discipline of his gift, to observe without being consumed, to empathize without being drained. His understanding had political ramifications he couldn't yet grasp. During a tense meeting with ambassadors from the Boer clans, known for their stubbornness, young Lysander, playing quietly in a corner, grew restless. He could feel the prickly, knotted threads of the negotiation, as he told me later. Bored, he unconsciously began to hum a simple, tuneless song, one that resonated with a frequency of calm. The heated voices in the room gradually lowered. The Boer ambassador's aggressive posture softened minutely. An agreement, stalled for days, was reached by sunset. Afterward, the ambassador remarked to Kaelen, "Your son has a peaceful presence. It clarifies the mind." Lady Moira, observing everything, later said to me, "His gift, properly honed, could be the greatest diplomatic tool this kingdom has ever known. He doesn't persuade, he harmonizes." But harmony was a fragile state. The shadow path we feared revealed itself not in a dramatic attack, but in a quiet, insidious plot. A disgraced former ally of Corbyn's, a man named Varin, had been biding his time. He saw not a blessed prince, but a potential puppet. A child who could influence emotions could, in the wrong hands, be used to manipulate a king, a council, a population. Varin's plan was cunning. He cultivated a friendship with one of Lysander's junior tutors, a man with gambling debts and a resentful heart. The plan was to gain access to the prince, to study him, to find a way to influence or exploit his gift. My seeing heart, always tuned to threats against my family, felt the wrongness around the tutor weeks before anything concrete emerged. It was a sour note in the castle's symphony. I alerted Kaelen, and Lord Thorne, with his network of old-school loyalists, began a discreet investigation. The trap was sprung on a day when I was walking with Lysander in the walled herb garden. The tutor approached, his emotions a nervous, greasy swirl. He carried a new game from the market, a complex puzzle box made of sweet-smelling sandalwood. "For my clever prince," he said, offering it. Lysander reached for it, but as his fingers brushed the wood, he recoiled with a sharp cry. He didn't see a box. He felt the intentions woven into it by the crafter Varin had hired, intentions of fascination, of obsession, of a subtle, addictive pull designed to cloud a young mind. "It's sticky," Lysander cried, hiding his hands behind his back. "The threads are bad and sticky." That was all the confirmation needed. Guards, hidden by Thorne's orders, moved in. The tutor broke immediately, confessing Varin's plot. Varin was captured trying to flee the city. His trial was swift. His crime was not just treason, but an attempt to corrupt the sacred bond of the royal family to weaponize a child's soul. The punishment was severe. The message was sent to any who might harbor similar thoughts. The prince was not a tool. He was the heart of the kingdom, and the heart was protected by fangs of steel. In the aftermath, Lysander was quiet for days. The encounter had shown him a dark use for the connections he cherished. We reinforced our earlier lesson. Your gift shows you truth, Lysander, Kaelen told him, holding him on his lap. The beautiful truths and the ugly ones. Seeing the ugly ones helps us protect the beautiful. What Varin tried to do was make something beautiful into something ugly. We stopped him. That is our duty to protect the good weave. Lysander looked up, his silver eyes serious. So I have to learn to see the sticky threads too? To keep them away? Yes, my son, I said, kissing his forehead. But never let looking for the sticky threads make you forget the feel of the strong, golden ones, like the one between you and your father, and you and me. A small smile finally touched his lips. He wrapped his arms around Kaelin's neck. This is a golden thread. The strongest one of all, Kaelin agreed, his voice thick. The threat had been neutralized, but it was a turning point. Lysander's childhood innocence was now tempered with a sobering understanding. His gift was not just wonder, it was responsibility. His reign would not be a fairy tale. It would be a conscious, daily choice to weave light into the tapestry, to mend broken threads, and to guard against those who would unravel it for their own ends. He was only 5. But the prince who would one day be king was learning his first, hardest lessons in the loom room of fate. And his parents, the blind queen and the wolf king, stood as his first and most devoted guardians, ensuring that when the shuttle was finally placed in his hands, he would weave a legacy of connection, not of control. The tapestry of his life was just beginning, and its pattern, though complex, promised to be breathtaking. 10 years to the day after I stumbled, lost, and bleeding into that forest stream, I stood on the balcony of Stonehaven. Not the secluded royal balcony, but the great public one overlooking the main courtyard. The spring sun was warm on my face, the air buzzing with the energy of thousands gathered below. Beside me stood Kaelin, his arms solid around my waist, his love for me a constant, warm hum in our bond. Before us, looking out with solemn, silver-gray eyes, was Lysander. At 10, he was tall for his age, possessing his father's strength in his bearing and a quiet, observant peace that was uniquely his own. Today was not his coronation. That was years away. Today was something else. Today was the festival of the first moon, a celebration of new beginnings. And today, by Kaelin's decree, it would also mark the official founding of the Circle of Scribes, not record keepers of events, but record keepers of truth. The idea had grown from Lysander's gift and my own. We had seen how perception shaped reality, how hidden fears festered into plots, how unseen pain could fracture a kingdom. The circle would be composed of individuals chosen not for nobility, but for their integrity and empathy. Some, like me, had unique senses. Others were simply wise listeners, healers, judges renowned for their fairness. Their role was to travel, to listen, and to bring the unvarnished truth of the people's hearts back to the throne, not as spies, but as bridges. It was a radical step, a formal admission that a king could not see everything, that a throne built only on power was a throne built on sand. Lord Thorne had grumbled about undermining royal authority, but even he had been swayed by Lysander's quiet question. Isn't a king strongest when he knows where the cracks are, so he can mend them before the whole wall falls? The courtyard fell silent as Kaelen stepped forward, his alpha voice effortlessly reaching every ear. People of Stonehaven, wolves of all territories, we gather under the spring moon, a symbol of cycles renewed. 10 years ago, my path was altered in a forest. I found not a threat, but a truth. I found that true sight is not in the eyes, but in the heart. That true strength is not in never stumbling, but in having a hand to lift you up. He reached back, and I stepped forward to join him, my hand in his. A warm murmur of affection rose from the crowd. Their emotions, which I could feel as a great, rolling wave, were overwhelmingly positive: respect, loyalty, a deep seated fondness for the blind queen who had taken a blade for her king and birthed their beloved prince. Our reign, Kaelin continued, has been built on this principle, on seeking truth, on valuing connection. And today, we plant a seed for the future. The circle of scribes will be our ears where our own cannot reach, our heart where our own might be clouded by duty. So that the kings and queens who come after us, so that our son, he placed a hand on Lysander's shoulder, guiding him forward, will rule not from an isolated peak, but from the solid ground of his people's reality. Lysander stood between us, facing the crowd. He was nervous, I could feel the flutter in his heart, but he was also determined. He did not speak of grand visions. In a clear, carrying voice that was so like his father's yet entirely his own, he simply said, "I will listen." 3 words, a child's promise, but spoken with the weight of a prince who saw the weave, who understood that every thread mattered. The crowd erupted not in wild cheers, but in a deep, resonant roar of approval. They felt the sincerity. They felt the new paradigm. After the proclamation, we descended to walk among them. It was something we did often now. Lysander moved ahead, guided by Elena, stopping to accept a flower from a little girl, to feel the texture of a newly woven banner from a guild master. People reached out not to grab, but to gently touch his sleeve, his shoulder, bestowing silent blessings. He accepted each touch, and through our bond, I felt him doing what he'd been taught, not absorbing their emotions, but acknowledging them, honoring the connection, then gently releasing it. I walked with Kaelin, my hand on his arm. People bowed and greeted us with warmth. "Your Majesty." "My Queen." The titles were no longer forms of address, they were earned endearments. An old woman, her scent of herbs and parchment marking her as a healer, approached me. She took my free hand, her skin papery and cool. "Thank you, daughter," she whispered, her voice choked. "My grandson, the one with the weak lungs, he is apprenticed to a master healer now. Because of the new apprenticeships, because you saw that talent matters more than birth." I squeezed her hand, tears in my own sightless eyes. "I am glad he thrives." This was our legacy, not just a kingdom secured, or a traitor defeated, or a powerful heir produced. It was a kingdom transformed in its spirit. The curse that had stolen my sight had, in its strange alchemy, given a kingdom a new way of seeing, with compassion, with connection with the heart. That night, in the quiet of our chambers, Lysander already asleep in his rooms, Kaelin and I stood on our private balcony. The sounds of the festival were a distant, joyful hum. "Do you remember," I said softly, leaning into him, "when you were just a silent wolf and I was a girl praying not to die alone in the dark?" He kissed my hair. "I remember thinking your courage was the most beautiful thing I'd ever encountered, and I was right. We've come so far," I mused. "The blind Omega and the lone wolf, who would have believed it? The moon goddess, perhaps," he said. "She gives us not the paths we expect, but the ones we need." He turned me to face him, his hands on my face. "You gave me back my sight, Elara. You showed me that a king's strength is in his people, and a man's strength is in his heart. Our son will rule a kingdom you helped heal. That is a legacy no crown could ever equal." We stood there as the moon rose, full and silver, bathing the mountain in the same light that had watched over a desperate girl and a wounded king in a forest clearing a decade before. Our story had never been about a rescue. It had been about a meeting. Two broken parts finding they made a whole that had then built, loved, and led. The curses were broken. The shadows had been faced. The throne was secure. But more importantly, the kingdom had learned to see in the dark. And it had found, as we had, that sometimes the most beautiful visions are those beheld not with the eyes, but with a heart that has learned to love without limits and to see without fear. Like this story. If you were moved by Elara and Kaelen's journey, please let us know. Like this video, subscribe to our channel for more tales of love, destiny, and finding strength in the unlikeliest of places. Kiss that bell icon so you never miss a new story. And most importantly, comment below with part 2 if you want to follow the next chapter of this saga. The story of Prince Lysander as he grows into his power and learns to weave his own destiny. Your support fuels our storytelling. And if you'd like to give an extra boost of support to our creative team, you can also send a super thanks. It helps us continue bringing you stories like this.